So I am really excited today. I've made a new friend over these past few weeks, Dr. Maria Maccecchini. We've met through some mutual relationship, and really have just become entranced by her personality and her being and what she brings to the world. Maria has 30 years of experience in the study of neurodegenerative diseases and seeking treatments for and breakthroughs in therapies specifically in the areas of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Down syndrome. She's presently the CEO of Annovis, and where they're doing this exciting and really good work. So Maria, I am so excited for us to spend a few minutes together. Thank you for joining me.
Jeff, I'm so excited to talk to you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Where I'd love to start always is, I just gave a little bit of a bio, but I would love to hear something out of your life that has shaped you that folks would not necessarily be able to find online or in your LinkedIn profile.
Well, I was born into a reasonably poor family. And my mom had this dream that she was going to have a son, and the son was going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Unfortunately, all she had was me. So I kept hearing that if I had a son, if we had a son, this son would get us out of poverty. We would be famous, he would be famous, and so on and so on. Well, unfortunately, there was just me. I actually do have a brother, but he came 11 years later. So here I was, and I took on all the responsibilities of this non-existing son. I was really good in school. I only had A's. I studied like crazy. I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer. And every time I said, I'm going to do this, my mom said, you're just a girl. You can't do this. But I did. I didn't become neither a doctor nor a lawyer. I decided I liked science better. But it seems to me that all through my life, when somebody said, you're just a girl, I'm small, so you're just a small woman, you're just a woman, I had to prove the opposite.
What decision do you think you made about life at those early ages?
I wanted to die. I hated it. I didn't have a childhood. And then I just said, I have to get the hell out of here. And I did.
And the reason I asked the question is what I've come to realize in my own journey is, and for lots of reasons, I've always brought my question to the world: do I have enough? Do I have what it takes? And what I've realized, again, from a number of factors in my life with my parents, is that life is up to me. I can't depend on them to make life happen. And so I made a decision probably around 12, 13 years old, that I have to make it work. Life is up to me. And I'm wondering if that type of decision at those early years is something that you made, to say, life sucks and my parents don't have the wherewithal for any number of reasons, and so life is up to me. Does that resonate at all?
That is a good, no, you described it very well, because at some point I have to say, I just have to get out of here and it's up to me to figure out how. And, because I was bright, I studied, and it did get me out of there. Now, the interesting thing is how it happened, because then everything turned around. Then I became the chosen child at some point in their life, because I was giving them everything they ever needed.
Yeah.
But it took a little while.
And
so why did you decide at 12 that life was up to you?
Oh, this is very vulnerable. I've never said this in a podcast conversation, but I made a decision. So my mom and I had a pretty contentious relationship. We butted heads a lot, and my dad never stepped in. My dad is a lovely man, generous, kind, still living, but he never stepped in. So I made a decision there. Well, this is up to me. And then also realizing, because of the way my dad was, or what he wasn't, that I had to figure life out. So my dad was great at giving me tips about fixing up things or doing small projects or helping me with school. But when it came to the larger questions of life, there was silence. And I realize now that he was ill-equipped from his parents, but the realization that, okay, these bigger questions of life and of love and of women and of career and all of that was up to me. I was going to have to figure it out by my own devices. And so I don't know that I could have said that when I was 13, but through the support of coaches and counseling, I've been able to see that decision that I made and then the impact that that's had on my life. And it's served me very well. I've been very successful because of that decision. But what I've also learned is, as a 47-year-old, that doesn't work anymore. That doesn't, because we were designed for dependence. I was designed for dependence and community and connection, and me taking Atlas's weight on my shoulders and just carrying it myself, especially as I age, especially in a wheelchair. That's not going to get me up the second mountain, so to speak.
So that's a good point, but it's interesting because my dad was like your dad, a very, very nice guy. Never argued with my mom. She argued with him. So, I mean, in hindsight, my dad was a wonderful person. He was just not equipped to protect me or protect himself, by the way, except,
Yeah. And for all the bad that was, what my sense is, just knowing your story, is that's also what has driven you to be the person that you have become over these last 30 plus years.
Yeah. No, my dad actually has a much bigger influence on me as I got older, because I saw the good in him. I didn't just see him as kind of the second person in the family. You know what I'm saying? Mom was dominant. Okay, she was definitely dominant. And he was there, but he was a really, really lovely person.
The name of the series is Conversations That Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. And I'm wondering, what's the conversation within that context of this role that you had to play in your family life, how it translated into your professional life, how I'm sure it contributed even to some of your success. What's the conversation you wish would have been had years ago around that subject?
Well, I wish my mom wasn't so set on a boy, but the reality is it did make me work harder. And then much, much later, when I was 37, I went back to my mom and I said, Mom, why were you always against everything I was doing? I was not on drugs. I didn't smoke. I just worked. I mean, working in those days was studying. She says, well, I never thought that a girl could take care of herself. I always thought you had to be pretty and get married because that's what women do. And then she said, you did pretty well for yourself. So if that had happened a lot earlier, I think I would have had a more relaxed life, but it's okay.
And how do you see that, in a general sense, playing out in the workforce today? Those messages that girls, women receive throughout their lives about who they should be or who they aren't. What do you see are those messages maybe we could call them those universal common messages that girls and women are getting in the workforce today?
Well, thankfully, the newer generations have been brought up or are being brought up in a much more egalitarian way. But even in the newer generations, if you look at the young girls today, I was just at the gym and this one kid, I mean, she looked gorgeous, but she looked like she should have gone to a bar or a nightclub, not to a gym. Her breasts were kind of hanging out and she looked gorgeous. Okay, I can't say anything negative, except that maybe that's the wrong message.
Mm.
You know, on one hand, you tell women you have to be self-supporting, you have to be independent, you have to take care of yourself, you have to be the same as a man. And on the other hand, you tell them you have to be sex objects.
Mm.
It's really, in my mind, some women may be able to do that, but a lot of women can't really split themselves that much.
Mm.
So while I think that we are doing a much better job telling girls that they have all the opportunities a man has, I also think that TV is selling too many women as sex objects. And I know I'm old, I'm conservative.
Mm. Mm. And one thing you had said to me in our previous prep conversation was this pressure to know or to have it all figured out in your life, professional life, and beyond. This pressure to come across as you have all the information, you know everything. What do you sense was behind that feeling like I have to know it all. I have to have all the answers.
But I also think it came from the same background as my mom wanting the perfect boy. So instead, she had the perfect girl. Of course, it can't be perfect. I mean, you don't just know everything, you don't just pull it out of thin air. So I learned very early on that I was always really prepared. Now, the truth is, I do not know everything. I know a lot about science, but because I do know a lot about science, I really don't know that much about anything else. Every so often, I watch the Super Bowl. That's about as far as it gets. So I do really think that the pressure to be the perfect boy did make me do a lot more background work before I opened my mouth. And then because people don't know that, it seems like it just comes out of nowhere, but it does not come out of nowhere. Every time I read about a new company that has a new Alzheimer drug, I go and I figure it out. I read their papers. I look at how their drug works. I look at their data. I look at the preclinical data. So it doesn't come out of nowhere if I say something like, well, yes, their animal studies don't look so good.
Mm. So what I'm hearing you say is the pressure that you felt. There's a tremendous energy and input of resources to make decisions, to make assessments, to figure things out. And it may seem like to the outside world that you have all this information, but really what I'm hearing, the truth is that you put a tremendous amount of effort to get to that point. Am I getting that right?
Yes, you're getting that right. Thankfully, as I get older, it's less because once your brain has a certain frame of how the body works, you can kind of put it into the frame and then it makes sense. Whenever you come up with something new, like the gut microbiome, my brain didn't have a frame for the gut microbiome. So I had to actually do a lot more background work before I could kind of say, well, maybe something works, something doesn't work. Maybe a prebiotic is a good thing or not a good thing. But overall, because my frame has gotten so big, it's easier to stick information in.
Mm. And I'm curious, as you've matured and years have passed, what's your relationship with knowing of that idea of being completely prepared, of having this perception that you have all the answers? Has that shifted at all to some
So.
other place?
Well, in I make a lot of mistakes. I'm not sure whether I used to make more or less. I just know that I'm much more honest about it. I say, oh, I was wrong. I say this a lot, which means I make a lot of mistakes. In terms of shifting to other places, let me talk about yoga, okay? When I started yoga, because I was starting to get stiff and people said, it's good for you, I was very, very embarrassed because I'm not good at it. I am stiff. I am genetically stiff. Some bones just don't want to move the way they should. And so I would stop. I would not go. I'd go twice and then I stop. And then I go twice and I stop. In the meantime, I love it. Who cares if I'm stiff? So I think I have become more open about not being perfect. I'm just whoever I am.
And how has that shaped you as a leader of people?
I don't know. That's a tough question because I have a really bad habit or characteristic. I only like very bright people. So I only have very bright people, and with those I get along fine. When my previous company, there was almost 140 people. And when somebody wasn't very bright, I just stuck them under somebody else. So that's a tough thing because in this small company, I can kind of choose that I do have the people I like.
And if you look at your history of leadership, has in your own shift of I make mistakes, I don't have it all figured out, I get stuff wrong, has that in your evolution as a leader, has that translated, even though there is a demand, what I'm hearing, a desire for really smart people, has there also been an openness that has been created for you in how you lead and manage them?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I say I love smart people, doesn't mean they don't make mistakes. We all make mistakes. No, yeah. In fact, if you are innovative, if you try something new, you're going to make mistakes, and that's perfectly fine. No, I don't have a problem with people making mistakes. I have a problem with people being dense.
What's the difference? Being dense and trying things, make mistakes, failing. What's the difference for you?
I think in my mind, it's the creativity. It's the brain reaching. It's trying something different. Dense means to do the same thing all over and not absorbing new things.
I love that distinction. I love that there's, it almost feels one is closed and one is open.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
And what I'm getting is it's not about being right or wrong. It's about that sense of them being closed or being open.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can imagine the type of the type of environment that creates when there's openness in all or most of the people that you've surrounded themselves with. What's the result in that environment that you see when you do select those open type people to work with?
I think that we are a lot more creative. We can turn, if something happens, we're very fast at changing gear, at turning, at coming up with novel ways of doing things. If you have a big company, that doesn't work because it creates too much chaos. I mean, structure is the opposite of creativity. And one of the very interesting things is that teamwork is a great thing, not for creativity. You get zero creativity out of teamwork. And that is something that I only learned because I used to work for a large company. Then my first company got bigger than I really wanted. I didn't know, it just got big. And at some point I realized we had politics. I never proposed. I didn't know how it happened, but we had politics. People took sides. People tried to get me to side with one group or the other group. And I realized that that's a waste of my time. It's not what I wanted to do in life. HR was not something I wanted to do in life. And I'm not a shrink. I'm not any good at it. So, I mean, the company did fine. It was whatever it was, but I realized that that's not the environment I enjoy. And in a very big company, you have 20 people in every meeting, maybe 25, because you can't offend anybody. So everybody comes to the same meetings, and that totally kills creativity.
Hmm. So as you sit on boards and you advise new CEOs and new companies. So given that seed of wisdom that you identified that works for you, what's the conversation that you're having with those new CEOs as you sit on boards or advise businesses to create a nimble, agile, open culture?
Wow, you're giving me more credit than I do. One thing I learned, right now I'm just on two boards. I mean, I'm also on the board of the Salvation Army and the Science History Institute, but in terms of companies. But what I learned when I was an angel investor is CEOs really don't want you to tell them what to do.
Mm.
They want your money, and then they want to be supported. So at that point, I mean, they come to you if they have a problem, but usually then it's too late in the sense that they ran out of money and it doesn't work. I actually, if I advise today, it's more like people that come out of high school or go into college. And my biggest advice is probably not what they wanted, because they want you to tell them you're good at X, do X. And I tell them, don't lock yourself in. You're going to live till 90. And if at 50 you want to get a PhD in astrophysics, go for it.
Yeah.
So what I'm telling kids is because they all worry, they want to do the right thing. And what I tell them is that there is no such thing as the right thing. That something may be right for 10, 20 years, and then it's not right anymore. And that's perfectly okay. And then you change. And that's perfectly okay, because you're going to live till 90. Your life doesn't stop at 30. You don't have to know at 18 what you're going to do at 31. Whatever you're going to do at 31 will be what you decide to do at 30. And I think that flexibility is something that to me is very important, because it's really how I got to where I am and reasonably happy. No, I'm happy with my life. It's because if something happened, I could pivot, I could do something else. And knowing that you're not stuck, you're never stuck. So in terms of what I tell kids is, yes, go for whatever you're good at. But if at some point you decide that you don't really like it or you want to do something else, don't feel guilty, just change.
Yeah. Well, I have a 14-year-old, and so I'm going to clip this little part of the conversation and I'm going to show it. I'm going to show it to her because she's very, very smart and also very stressed about what life will be. So just so you know,
okay.
I'm going to clip this and play it for Maddie. But I do want to go back to those conversations that you're not presently having with CEOs, but I'm wondering, what's the conversation you wish they would come to you and then you could have with them? Because that's our audience in this series is CEOs of life science companies. What's the conversation that you would like to have, but as you said, that doesn't happen very often?
Well, maybe it's also, again, an age thing, okay? If you are 27, 32, you start a company, you can't admit to being weak. You can't admit to being scared. You can't admit not to know something. And if they did, they probably would get more help. Part of mentoring is that somebody tells you, or that you just chat, and then it comes out that somebody is scared of something. And you can discuss it through, and maybe you can help, maybe you cannot help. But the simple fact that you can discuss it is helpful. And maybe, but our culture really doesn't want CEOs to tell you, I don't know what I'm doing. It's kind of scary. I had a guy who worked for me once, and he told me that the reason he quit his previous job is that his previous CEO told him that he wasn't sure the money would last. But yeah, if I'm not sure the money lasts, I do tell my employees I'm not sure. Isn't that, I think that's a much better way to manage. But this guy thought that the CEO should just be stoic.
Mm.
So it comes from both sides. Some
Yeah.
employees don't want their CEO to admit weakness, and some CEOs don't want to admit weakness. But if you do on both sides, you get more help.
Mm. Yeah, I love that piece of advice. So valuable. And we're in an age where vulnerability has become a little bit more in vogue. But it's still, we have a long way to go in feeling open to admit mistakes or admit weakness or admit that something may not go the way that we intend for it to go. So it's a really powerful message for leaders to hear. Just a little bit of a change of subject, but understanding that all of this is connected. You described yourself to me when we first spoke as a ridiculous realist. And I love that. It just put a smile on my face. Could you describe what a ridiculous realist is?
Well, especially in this day and age where politics is so split between the right and the left, and somehow they live in two different realities. I go, but the science is here. Hello, science is here. And I'm really not ideological at all. I mean, I want everybody to be happy, okay, and everybody to be rich and everybody, but it's not realistic, so skip that. I so I feel we really should follow the science, because if the science says wear a mask, I wear a mask. Now the science today says, yeah, a mask is a little bit, but a little bit is better than nothing. Okay, that's the way I see it. Vaccines definitely they're a lot better than nothing, but to listen to different. Okay, I have a good example. Somebody got shot by the police. I guess an African American got shot by the police. One channel showed how he kicked the policeman in his balls and then ran. The other channel showed how he ran and got shot in the back. What's wrong with showing the whole thing?
Mm. Mm.
And that's what bothers me about today's politics, that you pick and choose the reality you want to see versus the reality that is.
Mm. Yeah. And
So,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, please.
I'm curious, how does the ridiculous realist show up at work? What's that look like on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis for you, leading an organization?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, this morning I saw a news release and it said blah, 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 wonderful, everything is great. And I sent it to two people and said, what do you think? The news release was too good to be great. So maybe that's one of them, but I didn't tell them. I waited for the answer. I think I really look at the reality of what we do day to day, of our data, of how the FDA reacts to it. I'm not a regulatory person. I'm not an FDA person. And so far, I mean, data speaks. So data has always spoken. And I do believe that if I stick to data and I do show what our drug does, and I do tell the FDA what our drug does, and I do tell patients what our drug does, it's going to work.
Mm. How would your team, if I were to say to them, Maria is a ridiculous realist, what would they say? Would they say yes? Would they say, I'm not sure about that? What would your team say?
I don't know. I'll ask them. I'll get back to you.
Okay. Because it's always interesting. We have this perception. Even you said we live in these different realities. We have our own perception of ourselves, of how we show up, and the people that we deal with it in relationships, personal relationships, professional relationships. So it's I'd be curious if you do find out what their response to that description is.
You made me think, because I'll ask, definitely, but it's possible that I'm a ridiculous realist when it comes to data. Okay, I don't really know how that translates to human relationships. So I will ask.
Excellent. Yeah, please share back, and we'll find a way to share it with those that are watching this. What we've talked a lot about conversations, and I'm wondering, and we even talked about your early years, even as a young 3 to 5 year old, and also conversations with high schoolers. If you could go back and have a conversation with 20-year-old Maria, knowing what you know now, what's the conversation that you would have with her?
I would tell her to relax and enjoy life more. It seems like I work and work and work and work and work and work. And it seemed like I never quite got there. And of course, I still haven't gotten there wherever there is, because I need to have these drugs work in phase 3. Then I'm done, because my goal was to protect nerve cells from dying. And my first company didn't quite succeed in that, even though we made money, something else. And this company, I think, is going to succeed in it. Now, remember, if it doesn't work, I'm going to have to come back in my next life and make sure nerve cells don't die. But the truth is, overall, I look back and I worked so hard. And if I had worked a little less, I'd probably be at the same place.
So it sounds almost, that's the same advice that you would give 20-year-old Maria is the same advice you would give if you could step out of yourself, that you would give yourself even today.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I'll say it to you, Maria, relax a little bit. You're doing good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is such a joy, Maria. Before we sign off, is there anything that you would love to say to other CEOs that would encourage them, that would open them up? Is there anything that you would love to share with your colleagues out in the life science world based on your experience?
Well, I'm a little surprised how little interaction there is between CEOs of companies that work on Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease. I think that at some point we're going to have drugs that have to work together to make the condition better. And it seems like because we are competitive, we don't really talk to each other, which I know we could give away secrets, whatever, but I really hope there was going to be more interaction and more collaboration. I don't see it. Now, COVID hasn't helped in that respect at all, because we're all stuck at home. But I really wish we would work more together. I think it would help the field. We would get there maybe a little faster. We would have more combination therapies, and it would help the patients.
Yeah, and I really love that, because what I've gotten from you since the beginning, first time we spoke, is your deep care for the patient. And that really is what drives you in this season of your life, and probably for the better part of your professional life, is just really to support the patient. And I love that about you.
Thank you.
Well, this has been a joy. If people want to know more about you and they're searching online, where should they go?
Well, our website, we're just updating it, but it's annovisbio.com.
Okay.
And I guess you can look at our stock, even though it's just money, ANVS.
Great. And we'll put that in the notes for this conversation. Maria, thank you so much for your generosity and just your willingness to be open about who you are and your story. It's such a gift for everybody who's listening.